Hare Krishna. Omajnanatimandasya Sanansanasya
Recording in progress.
Sakshamilitam Yena Tasmai Shigurave Namah Shitchitayamanopistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svamrapakadamyam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shiyuda Padkamam Shigam Vaishnavam Sam Shirupam Jagajatam Saganaragnatam Vitam Tam Sadivam Sadvaitam Savdutam Parjana Saitam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Saganalita Shivishakam Vitam Shri Krishna Karunasinu Dinabandha Jatpate Gopesha Gopakanta Radhakanta Namastate Tapta Kansana Gaurangi Radhe Vindavaneshvare Vishabhanu Sutadevi Pranamama Haripriye Vankha Kalpta Visha Kripa Sindhave Visha Patinam Pavanabhyo Vaishnavyo Namo Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Vistaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swamiti Namni Namaste Saraswata Devi Gauravani Pachayani Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paskachaya Desakarani Srila Prabhupada Ki. So today we will discuss Canto 10, Canto 5, Chapter 9, the supreme character of Chad Bharat. That we will hear about how Sukadev, how Bharat Maharaj, after leaving the body of the deer, appears in the womb of a Brahman family, of the womb of the wife of a Brahman, that and we will learn from Bharat Maharaj in this chapter the importance of a satsanga tyag, avoid association with materialistic people, with people who don't have Krishna as the goal of their lives. So we'll start with reading the translation of verse 1 and 2. It is still in prose, the Sanskrit. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Cheva Narottanam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jyamudiyayat Nastavya Sabatyasu Nityam Bhagavata Sevya Bhagavatu Tamaslake Bhaktivaibhava Naistake. So, Srila Sukadev Goswami continued. My dear king, my dear king, after giving up the body of a deer, Bharat Maharaj took birth in a very pure Brahma family. There was a Brahman who belonged to the dynasty of Angira. He was fully qualified with Brahminical qualifications. He could control his mind and senses, and he had studied the Vedic literature and other subsidiary literatures. He was expert in giving charity, and he was always satisfied, tolerant, very gentle, learned, and non-envious. He was self-realized and engaged in devotional service of the Lord. He remained always in a trance. He had 9 equally qualified sons by his first wife, and by his second wife he begot twins, a brother and a sister, of which the male child was said to be the topmost devotee and foremost saint of saintly kings, Bharat Maharaj. This then is a story of the birth he took after giving up the body of a deer. If we go to the purport, we will read the second half. So it's said here, Bharat Maharaj was the firstborn son of Maharaj Rishabh in a rich Kshatriya family, but due to his willful negligence of his spiritual duty and his excessive attachment to an insignificant deer, he was obliged to take birth as a son of a deer. However, due to his strong position as a devotee, he was gifted with the remembrance of his past life. Being repentant, he remained in a solitary forest and always thought of Krishna. Then he was given the chance to take birth in a very good Brahmin family. So we may remember that in the last purport of the previous chapter, Srila Prabhupada writes, by constantly chanting and hearing the holy names and pastimes of the Supreme Lord, one certainly becomes purified and becomes a fit candidate for liberation. However, if one purposely falls down to sense gratification, he has to be punished at least for one lifetime, like Bharat Maharaj. That's what Srila Prabhupada wrote. Therefore, what's the message to us? Don't do it. Especially in Vrindavan, Srila Prabhupada said. In Vrindavan, you must be very careful as you are living in the presence of Krishna. If you do something like this, you may become a hog or a donkey. In Vrindavan with Srila Prabhupada in 1972, Srila Prabhupada was presenting Nectar of Devotion. You can become a monkey, a dog, or a tree in Vrindavan and have long lives. So be very careful. Don't willfully neglect. So what is the difference between willfully and accidental? Because what's the difference? If we willfully fall down, you don't lament and repent. Willfully is premeditated. He decided, now I'm going to neglect my spiritual duties. Accidental means that the devotee falls down but he resumes his devotional service. So that's the difference between willfully and accidental. Now verse 3. Due to his being especially gifted with the Lord's mercy, Bharat Maharaj could remember the incidents of his past life. So that's very extraordinary. Although he received the body of a Brahmin, he was still very much afraid of his relatives and friends who were not devotees. So that's an important point. They were not devotees. That they were not inclined to perform devotional service. So you can be a Brahmin and not being a devotee. So he was always very cautious of such association because he feared that he would again fall down. Consequently, he manifested himself before the public eye as a madman, dull, blind, and deaf, so that others would try to talk to him. In this way, he saved himself from bad association. Within, he was always thinking of the lotus feet of the Lord and chanting the Lord's glories, which save one from the bondage of fruitive action. In this way, he saved himself from the onslaught of non-devotee associates. So the Lord gave him a gift. What was the gift? He could remember his past life. He was afraid of his family association. So what was the problem? Why could he not be normal? That anyone can answer that? That why was that a problem, that he was afraid from his family and he couldn't be normal like everyone else? Someone wants to reply to this?
Hare Krishna Maharaji.
Hare
Uh,
Krishna.
as Maharaji, it is mentioned there were no devotees, and as we know, Asat Sangata Yehi Vaishnavachar. So he was concerned about his current life. He didn't want to fall down again, and consciousness influenced the consciousness. So he didn't want to take their association. So maybe
Yeah, you mentioned two important points here. He didn't want to fall down again, and his relatives and friends were not devotees. But what is, I would say, these are good reasons, but what's the prime reason? What was the lesson he had to learn? That he didn't want to become attached again. He saw the result. He had to go to a lifetime as a deer. That while remembering his previous lives, that so what? Yeah. He also, another reason is, he didn't want to perform pious or impious activities, because that would be maybe the cause of his fall down again. So externally, he was acting like a madman, and internally he was an exalted devotee. Text 4. The Brahman father's mind was always filled with affection for his son, Chad Bharat Maharaj, yes. Therefore he was always attached to Jad Bharat, because Jad Bharat was unfit to enter the Grihastha ashram. He simply executed the purificatory process up to the end of the Brahmachari ashram. Although Jad Bharat was unwilling to accept his father's instruction, the Brahman nonetheless instructed him in how to keep clean and how to wash, thinking that the son should be taught by the father. So why was Bharat unwilling to accept the instructions of his father? Can someone tell me? That why did he not want to follow this instruction and become clean and a good brahmachari? His father wanted to instruct him like that. Any comments?
Maharaj, maybe he didn't want to go back to these fruitive activities and maybe perform duties like in Varnashram.
Yeah, that maybe. It was, of course, the pious and impious karma both will bind you, and he didn't want that. That's certainly a reason. Therefore, we should not accept either one.
Mhm.
Any other reason why he was unwilling to accept the instructions of his father?
Hare Krishna. May I try?
Yes, sure.
Yes. By doing so, he will attract the attachment of his father.
Attachment of his father. Yeah, it's close by, I would say. The point is, if he would accept the instructions of his father, he would become indebted to his father. If he would accept the instructions, then he would have to be grateful and indebted and become entangled. That pious and impious karma. But let's hear.
I think Maharaj, maybe
Yeah.
another thought would be that if he start, accepting those instructions, then he will not be able to behave like dumb and deaf. And he will get wrapped up into this regular fruitive lifestyle.
Yes, sure. That is. He would become entangled. But let's hear the reason Srila Prabhupada gives in the purport here. That so if we go a few lines down here, that here. If one is developed in Krishna consciousness, there is no need to execute the prior regulative principles of karma kanda. Srila Madhavendra Puri said, "Oh, the regulative principles of karma, please. Oh, regulative principles of karma, please excuse me. That I cannot follow all these regulative principles, for I am fully engaged in devotional service." So he expressed a desire to sit somewhere beneath a tree and continue the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra. Consequently, he did not execute all the regulative principles. We know that the Goswamis in Madhavendra Puri, they were avadutas, completely independent. They were living under a different tree every night. That similarly, it said further, Haridas Thakur, he was born in a Mohammedan family. From the very beginning of life, he was never trained in in the Karma Kanda system, but because he was always chanting the holy name of the Lord, Lord Chaitanya accepted him as a Namacharya. That the authority in chanting the holy name. So we are, from the very beginning of our life, at least those in the West for sure, they were never trained in Varnashram. So further, Asyad Bharat Maharaj was always engaged in devotional service within his mind. Since he had executed the regulative principles continually for 3 lives, he was not interested in continuing to execute them, although his Brahman father wanted him to do so. So we have the step step-by-step process of the Vedas, but Shad Bharat did not need to follow this step-by-step process. He was already on the top floor. That he did not need to go on the steps, but he behaved as he understood nothing. What examples do we have besides Madhavendra Puri of devotees surpassing the Vedic rituals? Can you give some names? The great Avadutas. No names come to mind.
Nityanand Prabhu.
Please?
Nityanand Prabhu.
Nityananda Prabhu, yes. He was a great Avaduta. Who else?
Dattatreya.
Dattatreya, yes. Sure.
Shaphadev.
Say again?
Shaphadev.
Rishabdev.
Vishnaprem?
Rishabhadev.
Rishabhadev. He was the Supreme Personality of Godhead. You have also the Avanti Brahman. He was beyond the regulative principles. And then Gaurkishore Das Babaji. Certainly. Vamsidhar Babaji. That's great names in our line. Okay, text 5. Shad Bharat behaved before his father like a fool, despite his father's adequately instructing him in Vedic knowledge. He behaved in that way so that his father would know that he was unfit for instruction and would abandon the attempt to instruct him further. He would behave in a complete opposite way. Although instructed to wash his hands after evacuating, he would wash them before. Nonetheless, his father wanted to give him Vedic instructions during the spring and summer. He tried to teach him the Gayatri mantra along with Omkar and Vyariti. But after 4 months, his father was still not successful in instructing him. Text 6. The Brahman father of Jat Bharat considered his son his heart and soul, and therefore he was very much attached to him. He thought it wise to educate his son properly, and being absorbed in this unsuccessful behavior, he tried to teach his son the rules and regulations of Brahmacharya, including the execution of Vedic vows, cleanliness, study of the Vedas, the regulative methods, service to the spiritual master, and the method of offering a fire sacrifice. He tried his best to teach his son in this way, but all his endeavors failed. In his heart he hoped that his son would be a learned scholar, but all his attempts were unsuccessful. Like everyone, this Brahman was attached to his home, and he had forgotten that someday he would die. Death, however, was not forgetful. At the proper time, death appeared and took him away. So sometimes parents of devotee children, they hope their children will become learned scholars. But then the children fail to become that. That happens to us also. Srila Prabhupada said he was concerned simply with returning back to Godhead by the execution of devotional service, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam. He did not care for the Vedic instructions of his father. When one is fully interested in the service of the Lord, he does not need to follow the regulative principles associated in the Vedas. Regulated principles and enunciated in the Vedas. So many Karmakanda principles. For us, we we did not follow any regulative principles anyway. So it was easy to avoid for most of us. We weren't even in the Vedic structure. In some sense, it was easy to instruct us because we did not know about the Vedic structure, duties, and karma kanda. Here is described that death struck. So in the fourth canto it describes how death strikes. I'm going to the fourth canto back. And that was in chapter 24, text 66. There we have. My dear Lord, all living entities within this material world are mad after planning for things, and they are always busy with a desire to do this or that. This is due to uncontrollable greed. The greed for material enjoyment is always existing in the living entity, but your Lordship is always alert, and in due course of time you strike him, just as a snake seizes a mouse and very easily and swallows him. So time is compared here to snake, that why is time compared to snake? Can someone explain that?
Because snake strikes suddenly.
Suddenly.
That also comes suddenly.
Yes, because we are not alert, and the snake can come every moment. We think that we can do so many things, but death does not wait to finish our plans. The snake is always alert to strike. We go back to our fifth canto. Then text 7. Thereafter the Brahman's younger wife, after entrusting her twin children, the boy and the girl, to the elder wife, departed for Patiloki, voluntary dying with her husband. So they are gone, and then 8. After the father died, the 9 stepbrothers of Jad Bharat, who considered Jad Bharat dull and brainless, abandoned the father's attempt to give Jad Bharat a complete education. The stepbrothers of Jad Bharat were learned in the 3 Vedas, the Rig Veda and Sama Veda and Yajur Veda, which very much encourage fruitive activities. The 9 brothers were not at all spiritually enlightened in their devotion and service to the Lord. Consequently, they could not understand the highly exalted position of Jad Bharat. Text 9. Text 8, I mean. Degraded men are actually no better than animals. The only difference is that animals have 4 legs and such men have only 2. These 2-legged animalistic men used to call Jad Bharat mad, dull, deaf and dumb. They mistreated him, and Jad Bharat behaved for them like a madman who was deaf, blind or dull. He did not protest or try to convince them that he was not so. If others wanted him to do something, he acted according to their desires. Whatever food he could acquire by begging or by wages, and whatever came of its own accord, be it in small quantity, palatable, stale or tasteless, he would accept and eat. He never ate anything for sense gratification, because he was already liberated from the body conception which induces one to accept palatable or unpalatable food. He was dull in the transcendental consciousness he was full in the transcendental consciousness of devotional service. And therefore he was unaffected by the dualities arising from the bodily conception. Actually, his body was very strong as a bull's, and his limbs were very muscular. He didn't care for winter or summer, wind or rain. He never covered his body at any time. He lay on the ground and never smeared oil on his body or took a bath. Because his body was dirty, spiritual effulgence. Because his body was dirty, his spiritual effulgence and knowledge were covered. Just as the splendor of a valuable gem is covered by dirt, he only wore a dirty loincloth, and his sacred thread, which was blackish. Understanding that he was born in a Brahmin family, people would call him a Brahmabandhu and other names, but thus insulted and neglected by materialistic people, he wandered here and there. Text 9:10. It's 9:10. Okay. Now at 10 we have a purport here, and there this song of Narottama Das Thakur. Srila Narottama Das Thakur has sung Deya Smriti Nai Jara Samsara Bandhana Kahantara. One who has no desire to maintain the body, who is not anxious to keep the body in order, and who is satisfied in any condition, must be either mad or liberated. Actually, Bharat Maharaj, in his birth as Jad Bharat, was completely liberated from material dualities. He was a Paramahamsa and therefore did not care for bodily comfort. So this particular song here mentioned of Srila Narottama Das Thakur, Srila Prabhupada uses this as a theme song in the 5th canto. We already heard it in Srimad Bhagavatam 5.5.30, this Rishabhadev chapter, where Rishabhadev was traveling and everyone was mistreating him, throwing stones and stool and dust. So we will go back to the 5th chapter here, and then 5th chapter 5.5.30. And there we have the purport beginning. So here you have the same quote. Narottama Das Thakur says Desmiti Nai Jar Samsara Bandhan Kahantar. When a person fully realizes that the material body and the world are temporary, is not concerned with pain and pleasures of the body, then Srila Prabhupada quotes 2.14 Matras Pastu Tukantya Sitasnu Sukha Dukada Agamapayi Natya Stamsti Tikshasvabharata. O son of Kunti, the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress and their disappearance in due course are like the appearance and disappearance of winter and summer seasons. They arise from sense perception of sign of Bharat, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. So Srila Prabhupada one who is spiritually advanced has no connection with body or bodily actions and reactions. So in the next chapter we will hear about King Raugana, how he will insult Chad Bharat in so many ways. So Srila Prabhupada quotes this verse of Namdas Thakur and writes, when one comes to understand that one is not the body and attains the topmost plateau of spiritual realization, then one is not concerned about being fatty or skinny. In the Western culture, so many people are overweight. If you are not concerned, then you are either mad or liberated. Then again in chapter 19 of the 5th canto, later, that Srimad Bhagavatam, 19, text 14. The verse says, materialists are generally very attached to their present bodily comforts and to the bodily comforts they expect in the future. Therefore they are always absorbed in thoughts of their wives, children and wealth, and are afraid of giving up their bodies, which are full of stool and urine. So now there is something relevant for us. So if a person engaged in Krishna consciousness, however, is also afraid of giving up his body, what is the use of his having labored to study the Shastras? It was simply a waste of time. So this is a lesson for us. We should at least not be attached to the body. Then in the purport of Srimad Bhagavatam 5:9-14, Srila Prabhupada quotes the same verse of Narottam Das Thakur. Then and he writes, so 5:9, it's here. Srila Narottam Thakur, and the quote is here. So one whose practice has freed him from the anxieties of bodily needs is no longer in conditional life. Such a person is freed from conditional bondage. A person in Krishna consciousness must fully discharge his devotion service without material attachment. Then his liberation is guaranteed. So this is our goal, to be free from material attachment and serve Lord Chaitanya and go back to Godhead. Back to our chapter 9, verse 11. We read the verse. Chad Bharat used to work only for food. His stepfathers took advantage of this and engaged him in agricultural field work in exchange for some food. But luckily he did not know how to work very well in the field. He did not know where to spread dirt and where to make the ground level or uneven. His brother used to give him some broken rice, oil cakes, the chaff of rice, warm eating grains, and burnt grains that had stuck to the pot. But he gladly accepted all this as it were nectar. He did not hold any grudges and ate all this very gladly. So the first thing that happens when someone mistreats someone else in this world, then they have some grudge. You don't look at that person the same anymore. Then you look at that person very differently. But Chad Bharat didn't do that. There are no grudge. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada warns us not to be attached. Can someone read this purport of 11?
Hare Krishna. Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
The platform of Paramahamsa is described in Bhagavad Gita 2.50. Samadukka Sukham Dhiram so amritatvaya kalpate. When one is careless to all duality, the happiness and distress of this material world, one is fit for amritatva, eternal life. Bharat Maharaj was determined to finish his business in this material world, and he did not at all care for the world of duality. He was complete in Krishna consciousness and was oblivious to good and evil, happiness and distress. As stated in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Antyalila 4.176, Dvaite Bhadra Bhadra Jnana Sava Manodharma, Yei Bala Yei Mana Sava Brahma. In the material world, conceptions of good and bad are all mental speculations. Therefore, saying this is good and this is bad is all a mistake. One has to understand that in the material world of duality, to think that this is good or that this is bad is simply a mental concoction. However, one should not imitate this consciousness. One should actually be situated on the spiritual platform of neutrality.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So did you ever think of 215 describing the platform of Paramhamsa? Yamina Vyatatanti Purusham Purushasabha Sam Sukha Sukham Dhiram Somi Tatvaya Kalpatre. So when one comes to the point of tolerating all happiness and distress, one is fit for liberation, the verse says. That interesting, because why is it a mistake to think that this is good and this is bad? Shakespeare said, "In this world there is nothing good or bad, but thinking makes it so." Interesting. So one day you think it's good and the next day you think it's bad. It is a mistake to think this is good and this is bad. It's a mental concoction. There's a story of this Chinese farmer, an old story. And he had a horse. And one day his horse ran away. And all the villagers said, "This is bad. He lost his horse." Now he used the horse to work on the land, but he lost his horse. That's bad. And then 3 days later, the horse came back with 2 other wild horses. And now he had 3 horses. So the villager said, "Oh, that's good, very good. Now he has 3 horses." And then the son of the farmer was trying to tame these 2 new horses, wild horses. And while doing so, he broke his leg. And all the villagers said, "That's bad, he broke his leg." And then a few days later, a representative of the emperor came to the village to draft male sons, male young people into the army. But when he saw the son at a broken leg, he said, "No way, he cannot go to the army." And the villager says, that's good that he has not good to go to the army. It's good that he had a broken leg. So he doesn't have to go to the army. So it's all a good and bad, a mental concoction. There's, of course, you have people with a vision in goodness, and of those with a vision in ignorance. Just the opposite. That what thinks, the one in goodness thinks this is good, and the one in ignorance thinks that same thing is bad. But the bad thing in goodness becomes a good thing in ignorance. So it's just, so who is mad? Prabhupada said. Text 12. At this time, being desirous of obtaining a son, a leader of dacoits who came from a Sudra family wanted to worship the goddess Bhadrakali by offering her in sacrifice a dull man, who is considered no better than an animal. That text 13. The leader of the dacoits captured a man-animal for sacrifice, but he escaped, and the leader ordered his followers to find him. They ran in different directions but could not find him. Wandering here and there, in the middle of the night, covered by dense darkness, they came to a paddy field where they saw the exalted son of the Angira family, Chad Bharat, who was sitting in an elevated place guarding the field against the attacks of deer or wild pigs. 14. The followers and servants of the dacoit chief considered Chad Bharat to possess qualities quite suitable for a man-animal, and they decided that he was a perfect choice for sacrifice. Their faces bright with happiness, they bound him with ropes and brought him to the temple of the goddess Kali. So Srila Prabhupada comments in the purport. Bharat Maharaj appeared deaf and dumb. Yet he was the most intelligent man in the world. Nonetheless, being completely surrendered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he remained in that condition and did not protest being brought before the deity for slaughter. As we have learned from the previous verses, he was very strong and could have very easily avoided being bound with ropes, but he did not do anything. He simply depended on the Supreme Personality of Godhead for his protection. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur describes his surrender unto the Supreme Lord in this way. Marabi Rakabi Yoicha Tuharam Nityadas Pratituya Adhikara. My Lord, I am now surrendered unto you. I am your eternal servant, and if you like you can kill me, or if you like you can protect me. In any case, I am fully surrendered unto you. So even though he was not treated properly, they were going to kill him. Do you remember examples from the Bhagavatam of devotees who were fully surrendered, that in the Bhagavatam or anywhere?
Ambarish Maharaj Jawat.
Ambarish Maharaj.
Srila,
Yeah.
Srila Prabhupada.
Yeah.
Maharaj Parikshit.
Who?
Parikshit.
Parikshit Maharaj, yeah.
Prahlad Maharaj.
Prahlad Maharaj. And his friend
Chitraketu Maharaj.
Chitraketu. Yeah. And Bali Maharaj is surrendered. Gajendra. Draupadi also, when she was dishonored. So Bali Maharaj, he said to Sukracharya, his guru, it was 8:20:11. Can go to Canto 8:20:11. O great sage, O great saintly persons like you, being completely aware of the Vedic principles for performing ritualistic ceremonies and Jahyas worship Lord Vishnu in all circumstances. Therefore, whether that same Lord Vishnu has come here to give me all benedictions or punish me as an enemy, I must carry out his order and give him the requested tract of land without hesitation. So this was Bali Maharaj's mood of surrender. That goes Sukracharya did not agree. We go back to 5th canto, text 15. After this, all the thieves, according to their imaginative ritual for killing animalistic men, bathed Jad Bharat, dressed him in new clothes, decorated him with ornaments befitting an animal, smeared his body with scented oils, and decorated him with tilak, sandalwood pulp, and garlands. They fed him sumptuously, and then brought him before the goddess Kali, offering her incense, lamps, garlands, parched grain, newly grown twigs, sprouts, fruits, and flowers. In this way they worshipped the deity before killing the man animal. And they vibrated songs and prayers and played drums and bugles. Jad Bharat was then to make sit down before the deity. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada speaks about animal sacrifice and slaughterhouses in Calcutta. That the slaughterhouse was advertised as a temple of the goddess Kali, promoting the meat as prasad from the goddess Kali. That, in the middle of the purport, Srila Prabhupada said, for instance, in Calcutta recently, a slaughterhouse was being advertised as a temple of the goddess of Kali. Meat eaters foolishly purchased meat from such shops, thinking it different from ordinary meat and taking it to be prasad of the goddess Kali. The sacrifice of a goat or a similar animal before the goddess Kali is mentioned in the Shastras, just to keep people from eating slaughterhouse meat and become responsible for the killing of animals. That the conditioned soul has a natural tendency towards sex and meat eating. Consequently, the Shastras grant them some concession. Actually, the Shastras aim at putting an end to these abominable activities, but they impart some regulative principles so that healthy meat eaters and sex hunters will be rectified. Text 16. At this time, one of the thieves acting as a chief was ready to offer the blood of Jad Bharat, who they imagined to be an animal man, to the gods of Kali to drink as a liquor. He therefore took up a very fearsome sword, which was very sharp, and consecrating it by the mantra of Bhadra Kali, raised it to kill Jad Bharat. Text 17. All the rogues and thieves who had made arrangement for the worship of the goddess Kali were low-minded and bound to the modes of passion and ignorance. They were overpowered by the desire to become very rich. Therefore they had the audacity to disobey the injunctions of the Vedas, so much that they were prepared to kill Jad Bharat, a self-realized soul born in a Brahmin family. Due to their envy, these dacoits brought him before the goddess of Kali for sacrifice. Such people are always addicted to envious activities, and therefore they dared to try to kill Jad Bharat. Jad Bharat was the best of friends of all living entities. He is no one's enemy, and he was absorbed in meditation on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He was born of a good Brahman father, and killing him was forbidden, even though he might have been an enemy or aggressive person. In any case, there was no reason to kill Jad Bharat, and the goddess Kali could not bear this. She could immediately understand that these sinful dacoits were about to kill a great devotee of the Lord. Suddenly the deity's body burst asunder, and the goddess Kali personally emerged from it in a body burning with an intense and intolerable effulgence. That's in the middle of the purport. The Vedas did not at all sanction the killing of Jad Bharat by a Roxan thief. Consequently, the goddess Bhadra emerged from the deity to give protection to the Lord's devotee. There's a story that Advaita's father, Brahman, he was related to a king, I forgot the name, but when Advaitacharya was very young, he took him to the temple of the king. The temple was worshipping the goddess Durga. And when everyone who came into the temple offered his obeisances, but Advaitacharya would not. And his father was chastising him. You should offer your obeisances to the deity. And his father said that in the presence of the king. But then Advaitacharya said, the deity may not bear it if I offer obeisances. But his father in the presence of the king said, you should offer your obeisances. And Advaitacharya offered his obeisance to the deity of Durga, and the deity broke in thousands of pieces. Because Advaitacharya is Mahavishnu, is the Supreme Lord. So, text 18. Yeah. We have 5 minutes to go and then questions, so no need to take a pause, I think. Intolerant of the offenses committed, the infuriated goddess Kali flashed her eyes and displaced her fear-curved teeth. Her reddish eyes glowed, and she displayed her fearsome features. She assumed a frightening body, as if she were prepared to destroy the entire creation. Leaping violently from the altar, she immediately decapitated all the rocks and thieves with the very sword with which they had intended to kill Jad Bharat. She then began to drink the blood that flowed from the necks of the beheaded rocks and thieves, as if this blood were liquor. Indeed, she drank this intoxicant with her associates, who were witches and female demons. Becoming intoxicated with this blood, they all began to sing very loudly and dance as though prepared to annihilate the entire universe. At the same time, they began to play with the heads of the rocks and thieves, tossing them about as if they were balls. So Srila Prabhupada makes an interesting point in the purport. Can someone read the purport of verse 18, please?
Hare Krishna.
Please, thank you.
It is evident from this verse that the devotees of Goddess Kali are not at all favored by her. It is Goddess Kali's work to kill and punish the demons. Goddess Kali Durga engaged in decapitating many demons, dacoits, and other unwanted elements in society. Neglecting Krishna consciousness, foolish people try to satisfy the goddess by offering her many abominable things. But ultimately, when there is a little discrepancy in this worship, the goddess punishes the worshipper by taking his life. Demoniac people worship goddess Kali to obtain some material benefit, but they are not excused of the sins performed in the name of worship. To sacrifice a man or animal before the deity is specifically forbidden.
Yeah, so if you are worshipping Durga and you make a mistake, you may be finished. Yeah, we may all remember when we go to Mayapur, on the road of Mayapur, especially during the holy time, there are all this, they make all these altars of Durga that, Kali Puja 19. When an envious person commits an offense before a great personality, is always put in the way mentioned above. Last verse. And now we will hear about the great quality of Bharat Maharaj, of Shat Bharat. Sukadeva Goswami then said to Maharaj Pariksit, O Vishnu Datta, those who already know that the soul is separate from the body, who are liberated from the invincible knot in the heart, who are always engaged in the welfare activities for all living entities, and will never contemplate harming anyone, are always protected by the Supreme Personality of Godhead who carries his disc, the Sudarshan Chakra, and acts as the supreme time to kill the demons and protect his devotees. The devotees always take shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord, therefore at all times, even if threatened by decapitation, they remain unagitated. For them this is not at all wonderful. So this is the great quality of Bharat Maharaj. He had the strength to fight, but he did not do it. Can someone read the last purport to finish?
These are some of the great qualities of a pure devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. First, a devotee is firmly convinced of his spiritual identity. He never identifies with the body. He is firmly convinced that the spirit soul is different from the body. Consequently, he fears nothing. Even though his life may be threatened, he is not at all afraid. He does not even treat an enemy like an enemy. Such are the qualifications of devotees. Devotees are always fully dependent on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the Lord is always eager to give them all protection in all circumstances.
Thank you very much. So any comments or questions, please?
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
I know through the scriptures that I am not this body, I am a soul. But how to experience this? I am a soul, I am not a body. Because I am seeing this body. I am thinking this is real.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is a process of purification. In Krishna consciousness takes usually 30, 40 years. If one practices sadhana and one gives up offenses, that takes already a few years usually to give up these offenses, then this anartha nivritti starts to take place. But how quick does it go? It depends on our eagerness. And my experience is that spiritual life becomes more easy when one is constantly in association of devotees. So I don't miss a morning program. I'm always with the devotees in the morning, the whole morning program. Because I know that is purifying the heart. So it takes a while. But at the same time, two things, the purification, at the same time acting as a spirit soul, using one's body, mind and words in the service of Krishna always. That is acting as a liberated person. Always using body, mind and words in the service of Krishna. And that's acting as a spirit soul. If you always act like that, then you will become a coconut in the summer in the heat. If it lies for a time in the heat of the sun, then the inner part comes loose from the shell and you start to, if you shake you can hear it. So in that way we start to realize, as we become free from this duality, good and bad, that we are not a body. So, and that is the first step in spiritual life. This purification takes a while. But if you follow this process and you are 24 hours engaged in devotional service, it means savai pusaparodamo yato bhakto adoxe ahait kapatiya yatma supashidati. Pure devotional service is there to please Krishna. And that gives satisfaction to the soul. Then, but there are two conditions: uninterrupted and unmotivated. If you do these two, unmotivated and uninterrupted, then you will experience the presence of the soul, or acting as a spirit soul. But unfortunately, mostly we live in our minds. As long as we are living in the mind and follow what was the business of the mind. The business of the mind is to keep us here in this world by accepting and rejecting, absorbing in this duality. And that's a big disease. So we should not listen to the mind. How do we avoid listening to the mind? It's using the mind in Krishna's service. And this is an art to be learned. Don't absorb yourself in the world news or in Facebook with all these things that are going on. That's not a solution. That keeps you in this world, and that keeps you identifying on the body concept. Also, association with advanced devotees is very helpful. It's a process. I experience that also. That yes, the mind has material desires. But if you are fixed up in your sadhana, even if the mind sometimes fixes on these desires, you never do it. But the mind is going. But finally you conclude, I'm not going to do it. So it's a process. It's not something that happens overnight. A process that usually goes over more than a lifetime. That whatever advancement we make, we get to the next stage. And that's the example that we learn from Chant Bharat.
Yes.
So, and it's in three lifetimes, it's not so much. And he will become he's now a great liberated soul. So he didn't care for anything in this world that would entangle him in this good and bad, poison, all these things. He was always fixed on Krishna. And we will hear the beginning of this beautiful discussion between Jadbharat and Maharaj Raghunath. And then he will reveal his greatness, how he is above the body concept of life. So it's a process. That's what I can say. Does that help?
Yes, Maharaj. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Mother Goloka Vashini, please.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you very much, Maharaj, for explaining so nicely. Maharaj, I have a question like, is it necessary that every liberated person shows the symptoms which Jad Bharat is exhibiting as a liberated soul?
That they show it in different ways. Jad Bharat had a particular reason to act like this because he has been in the body of a deer, a very heavy experience. And he didn't want that anymore. He had learned his lesson. I don't want it anymore. And he was so determined not to be entangled anymore. So he learned his lesson. Well, there are other examples. Avanti Brahman, he learned his lesson in a different way. He had to go to immense frustration. And in the frustration became too much. And he understood this frustration comes from my material desires. I give them up. And he got the power to give them up. And he lost his interest in the same way as Jad Bharat. He lost his interest in the so-called good and bad. And he was begging, and whatever happened, good or bad, he accepted it at Krishna's mercy, equal. So yes, he learned it in a different way. But as we heard before, first class learning is hearing the Bhagavatam. If you go to the Bhagavatam, verse by verse, in association of devotees, when we come to the 9th canto, something will have happened in our heart. And if we have followed it properly, then a lot of our material attachment will have gone. We will made a big step toward liberation. That's first class learning. That's the process. Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu Smaranam offered by the Bhagavatam, which is Krishna himself who came back in Kali Yuga to help us. So that's first class. Does that help?
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you. So we have a few more. Ajay Prabhu, please.
Hare Krishna, thank you very much. In purport to verse 17, Prabhupada says that killing of animals in sacrifice to demigods is sanctioned for one who eat meat. Then in purport 17, Prabhupada says to sacrifice a man or animal before the deity is specifically forbidden. So I'm referring to animal sacrifice. So in the previous purport, like 17, Prabhupada mentions killing of animals in sacrifice is sanctioned for meat eaters. But in the next report, he actually says it's forbidden. So what could be the context here?
Yeah, now in the first purport, where he says, it is sanctioned, that refers to meat eaters, because I heard yesterday or the day before a lecture of Prabhupada on that. And he says, yes, it's sanctioned for meat eaters to eat, to offer once a month a goat to the deity of Kali at a certain specific moment. That's the Amyavasya of the moon. On that day, they can offer it, but they offer it with a mantra saying, "Oh my dear animal, I'm going to offer you now to eat your meat. You can, I will, in my next life, I will become the goat and you can offer me. So, from that perspective, it's like an allowance for the meat eaters, but they have to pay for it very heavily. That in the other purpose, Prabhupada said one should not do that before the deity. And that, which purpose was this? Yeah,
in Prabhu, in 17, the middle is the killing of animal in sacrifice who are into demigods is sanctioned for those who eat meat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the
In the
killing of
next one,
animals in
he says,
sacrifice to demigods were expansions of the Supreme Personality of God is sanctioned with meat. So this is a kind of restriction for meat eating. So that we have explained, but then there was the other reference that you said, that Prabhupada said that
the next verse. If you go to the next verse,
yeah,
next purport. Yeah, here it's the last sentence. The last sentence of the purport.
to sacrifice a man or animal before the deity is specifically forbidden. That refers to the goddess Kali. Demonic people worship goddess Kali to obtain some material benefit, but they are not excused of the sins performed in the name of worship. So that's the point that I made. They offer it to Kali, but still they have to get reactions. That therefore better not to do that. It's forbidden.
It makes sense. Yeah. Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good. We had one more, I think. Who else raised his hand? No one?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. It's me.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Maharaj. Yeah. So, Maharaj, my question is that even by devotee standards, Jad Bharat follows a very extreme kind of a life or a lifestyle. It's almost like a Mr. Do Nothing kind of a lifestyle. And then Prabhupada writes also that, Krishna protects because he's like surrendered. So my question is this a sort of a standard that devotees should follow, like in general in their life? Like should we be do nothing and Krishna will take care, or should we be like God helps those who help themselves? Like should we be like people who do our work, our duty, and then yes, also depend on Krishna, or whether we should be, whenever we have situations in life or problems or things like that, have a do nothing attitude and say, all right, Krishna will protect. Haribol.
If you are as surrendered as Jad Bharat, you can do what Jad Bharat does. Otherwise not. Don't try it even. So surrender, that the problem is, we tell Krishna, I surrender unto you, but at the same time we have these material desires, which are prayers to Krishna for material enjoyment. That's contradictory. Jad Bharat did not have that. He was pure in heart. He had surpassed liberation. That he was identifying with his spiritual body. He was practically not aware of his, as an Uttamadhikari, he was not aware of his material body. Like a drunken man is not aware that he is wearing clothes. That was the situation of Bharat Maharaj. So we cannot imitate that. If we become an Uttamadikar, then you can try to do that. But otherwise, no. We are in a process of surrender. That's a reality. We are not yet fully surrendered. And that's the difference. That if we are not fully surrendered, we have to do our duty for Krishna as good as possible and purify ourselves. Purifying. And therefore we will hear in the 7th canto the duties of the different ashrams, how to purify oneself. Process for Grihasthas, process for Brahmacharis, process for Vanaprasthis and Sannyasis. And it's different for everyone. That, of course, everyone chants and hears about Krishna, that's general. But these duties we must perform as long as we are not liberated. But he was beyond liberation, far beyond liberation. He was an Avadutta, therefore. So if you are an Avadutta, no problem. But you must really be an Avadutta, not just thinking I'm an Avadutta. Does that help, Shyam Kishore?
Hare Krishna Maharaj, yes, somewhat I would say, but like one of the things that we read also in Nectar of Devotion, Krishna Anushilanam. So following the footsteps of the acharyas, and that's what when we read Srimad Bhagavatam, we get inspired by the various devotees, and of course not imitating, but following their footsteps. And of course, Jar Bharat seems to be a case where even following his footsteps is like something which is like very, very tough, as you said, unless one is Uttamadikari. So my question is, for most of us devotees who are just practicing or trying to do sadhana bhakti, what can we learn from Jar Bharat's this whole leela that we can follow in our lives?
That's the red line in this 5th chapter. That's don't identify with the body, but with the soul. And that is the point. And the symptoms of not identifying with the body are there in Jar Bharat. That it doesn't want unnecessary association with non-devotees. But in the next chapter we will see if necessary, if he has someone who is receptive, he will preach. He will preach. But his family members were not receptive. They were karma kandis. They were not interested in Krishna. They didn't even believe in Krishna. And that's dangerous. A satsanga nectar of instruction. That we learned in Nectar of Instruction, and this is the practical application here by Jar Bharat. Not to associate with non-devotees, but with King Rogana, he will preach. No problem. And he will start speaking for the first time in his life. Because that was in Krishna's service. Now I can preach to my family members I could not preach. They were not devotees. Satsangatya. Keep your consciousness protected. There are so many dangers in this material world. The television, the media, and so on. It's Maya crying out. So we should stay aloof from these things, far away from these things, unless we can use it in preaching. That's a lesson to be learned. Is it okay? Shyam Krishna Prabhu.
Yes, Hare Krishna. Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you. Acha Prabhu.
Raja, thank you. Follow-up question to this previous question I had. Prabhupada says demonic people worship Kali to obtain material benefit, but they are not excused of the sins performed in the name of worship.
Yeah.
So, this person who performs worship of Kali to eat meat, he is not excused of the sins.
No.
Now, how do we compare the person worshipping the deity of Kali and getting, and eating meat versus person who does not do that, who kills the animal without offering to the deity?
What's the difference between
What is the difference?
between
If
one?
both are getting sins, so why would we worship the deity?
The difference, I would say, the one who worships Kali and follows these regulative principles once a month, that he will get the reaction of that in his next life, but it is restricted. He follows restriction of the Vedas. That and therefore he's not doing it all the time. And that in his next life may be of his benefit finally. That otherwise I don't see any difference. Both get reactions. That because it's only Krishna who can purify our heart and takes our sins away. The demigods do not have that power. Only Krishna is a purifying factor. They don't have that power. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you, Ajapal. Pulastya Munipa.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. First of all, I would like to apologize because I couldn't attend the lesson earlier because the electricity went off and there was no internet to where I am because it's raining in Vrindavan at the moment, so the electricity comes and goes. Anyway, regarding my question, I don't know if at this point is relevant, but I'm just going to ask whether one of the lessons that we can learn from the story of Jad Bharat is that a devotee never advertises himself as such.
And that's a good point.
Could that be one of the lessons?
That indirectly would say yes, because we know an Uttamadikar, if he has developed this relationship with Krishna. Vishaka asked Prabhupada, what's your relationship with Krishna? And Prabhupada said, this is none of your business. That's so, because it is in the scriptures. If you reveal that, you lose the realization because it's confidential. So a devotee never does that. But naturally, if one advances, one thinks himself the lowest. One is not the lowest, but one thinks like that. So naturally, one becomes very humble and never advertises oneself. That is certainly a symptom. Of course, Prabhupada was special. He was an Uttadikar, but he had to come down to the Madhyam platform to deal with us. That he acted on the Madhyam platform. Still, he was an Uttamadikar. But an Uttamadikar sees everyone is better than me, so what can I do? That who am I? That yes, that's certainly Jad Bharat. He didn't want to reveal his relationship with Krishna, with his family members. He kept it hidden very secretly. And he was always within with Krishna. He was living in his relationship with Krishna. It's a good point. Thank you, Pulasya. I hope everything is well in Vrindavan now. And I hope to visit sometime again. But, thank you. Hare Krishna. Jai Prabhupada. We see each other then tomorrow to discuss the discussion between Jad Bharat and Maharaj Hare Krishna. Jai Prabhupada.
Recording stopped.